Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tung Nguyen. I'm the Executive Director of OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates, and I'm so honored to co-host this event with MMTC and Robert Branson's team, as well as LGBT Tech, Carlos and Chris's team, as well as HTTP. I don't see Julianne yet, but as her team as well. We're bringing to you, to kick off the year, just an overview of the year's Tech and Telecom agenda and what our friends here on this panel are prioritizing, working on at the moment. I want to thank our host for today, CTIA, and I'm really honored that the CEO of CTIA is here, who I think shouldn't need any introduction for this room, but just in case you're not familiar, Ajit Pai joined CTIA as its president and CEO in April of 2025. He came there from Searchlight Capital Partners, leading a global private investment firm where he has been a partner since 2021. And prior to Searchlight, Mr. Pai had a distinguished public service career at the Federal Communications Commission as chairman during President Donald Trump's first term, where he implemented major initiatives to help close the digital divide, promote U.S. leadership in 5G, encourage innovation, and safeguard consumers and national security. Mr. Pai was also appointed to the FCC as commissioner in 2012 by President Barack Obama. He graduated with honors from Harvard University and from the University of Chicago Law School. So, Chairman Pai, thank you for opening the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for that warm introduction. You left out two important items, though. One was a certain mug that I was used to using at the FCC. And the other is, as I always point out, my mother observing that I lack a medical credential, which to her at least was the most important part of my career, or the most important gap in my career, I should say. I also want to extend thanks to one of my coworkers here, Jocelyn, CTIA's finest, for helping to put us all together today. She's a fantastic advocate for all of us, and we're so glad to have her on the team, as well as others who are here in attendance. It's a pleasure to welcome you here to our building. I am less than a year on the job, but I love this position in part because the things that we are advocating for and the teammates we have here really believe in the mission, as I know all of you do too. Each of us has a different mission and focus, but I think the one thing that connects all of us is a pretty powerful theme, and that is that technology and connectivity are fundamental to creating opportunities for all Americans across this great country. Now, I know the topic du jour is 2026 tech trends, so we'll undoubtedly be talking about AI. There's no topic or technology that generates more interest today, and that's for good reason. As the AI transformation begins in earnest, one thing that is already clear is that we need connectivity everywhere. And I know many of you have been strong champions of closing the digital divide. That's a goal that I very much share, coming from a small town in Kansas many years ago. And we want, and I know you want, to make sure that everyone can benefit from the AI-based technologies of the future. And that means that the networks of the present have to reach everyone as well. Now, I'm very proud that the wireless industry has been at the vanguard of expanding connectivity across the country. More Americans than ever before have better access than ever before to wireless. And that's enabled consumers to benefit from all of these innovations, from agriculture to healthcare, from accessibility to public safety. And you also see it in one of the key metrics, at least key metrics for me, which is beef consumption. If you'll permit me a little bit of a digression here. Back in 2024, there were 396 million mobile connections. That meant that over 396 million devices could enable you to keep up with Kendrick versus Drake at that time anyway. Last year, there were 411 million mobile connections. And so those of you who are wondering who had the better of it, Taylor Swift or Charlie XCX, could figure it out over those mobile connections. Today, there are expected to be about 430 or so million connections. And so I have no idea what beef Doja Cat is going to get into with her fan base, but I can assure you that millions of people are going to be keeping up with it. For my part, just to be clear, if there aren't any reporters in the room, I firmly take the side of Doja Cat against her fans. So anyway, back to regularly scheduled programming, as they say. Now, importantly, the wireless industry has been delivering when it comes to affordability. We know that families are facing tougher choices than ever before when it comes to the prices of housing and groceries and other goods. And we're not just CTIA employees, we're also consumers ourselves, and so we're sensitive to that. The good news here is that wireless truly stands apart in a good way. Last year, in fact, over the last year, the price of wireless service has decreased by more than 6%. And even better than that, we're offering more for less. Speeds are up 50% year over year, and consumers are using ever more services. Data usage, for example, is up 32% just over the last year alone. And one reason for that affordability is competition. We all benefit from a choice of providers, whether it's the nationwide providers, some of the regional providers that we have, resellers, or others in the wireless ecosystem. And beyond that, on the service level, we can pick from plans that meet our needs, whether it's unlimited plans, prepaid plans, and more. And I'm confident that these trends are going to continue on the wireless side. And that is just the wireless side, by the way. The major development in recent years has been the competitive slash that wireless companies have made in the fixed broadband market. For too long, as many of you might know, in some of the places where you live, Americans have had too little choice when it comes to broadband, or no broadband options at all. Thanks to 5G, wireless has really invigorated the market for home broadband. Virtually all new home broadband subscribers over the past 3 years have been for fixed wireless, 5G home. That's 16 million households across the country who have voted with their wallets, so to speak, who are attracted by prices as low as $35 a month and a very easy to do-it-yourself installation. Wireless is also proving to be critical in rural areas where there were no home broadband options at all. And remarkably, 20% of 5G home broadband subscribers are new to broadband altogether. So these are literally people who are off the grid, digitally speaking, who are now on it because of wireless innovation. Now, of course, to state the obvious, affordability and competition and access don't just fall from the sky, sad to say. So what you may ask are the key inputs here? Well, the most important, of course, is licensed spectrum. To connect more homes, to bring more access to people, to carry more data, to help better compete with some of those sleepy fixed incumbents who had a good run of the market for a while, we need more spectrum, more public airwaves to benefit the public. And the challenge today is even more keen because as AI starts to transform our economy, we're going to need more of those wireless connections to help transmit all of this data, which is primarily going to happen on a mobile platform. And so you won't be surprised to hear that we at CTIA are spending a lot more time on AI now. AI traffic is projected to grow roughly 3 times relative to non-AI traffic in the coming years. And that's going to create a lot more demand for uplink capabilities as physical AI takes off, whether it's a robot in a warehouse or a smart device helping a patient. And so to keep up with that, we're going to need to reimagine wireless networks for the future. If we want AI to be mobile and secure and resilient and globally competitive, we need to make sure that we have the modern wireless systems that are capable of carrying it. And so that means hundreds of megahertz of new spectrum, new modern network architecture to adapt to the new needs of the networks, and more. And so this is a really big task and one that I hope you will embrace with us as partners who mission we share as we aim to deliver for all Americans. So anyway, enough of my filibustering in the grand tradition of Washington. I hope we have given you a taste of CTIA, both literally, I see some delicious lunch out there, as well as figuratively through my remarks. And I just want to say again, thank you for all that you do to help advance this mission of bringing everybody greater connectivity. It's really a key to economic opportunity and personal security in the years to come. And we can't wait to work with you to help embrace this vision for all Americans. With that, let me turn it over to my friend, the OG. As I mentioned to him, you know you've arrived when you don't have to show up to an event wearing a tie. You just show up as you are and deliver the message. Bob Branson from MMTC, everybody.
Thank you all for coming in. Thank you for my partners, ICTP, LBT Tech, and LCA. And you know, whenever I see him, I always want to say, Mr. Chairman, because that's how I've known him all these years. I remember when I was president of the Federal Communications Bar Association, I had a chance to sit down with him and talk to he and his wife and learn how many connections we had together. You know what I mean? Our families are very, very similar. You know, law, medicine, right? Yeah. Families from Kansas, out of Missouri, you know what I mean? So, but his comments were right on time because, you know, today we look at what's going on with AI, and the panel, of course, will get into that. We will learn about issues regarding spectrum. There's so many things going on right now. We are at the precipice of a lot going on. That's why we wanted to bring this to you. and it's why we have assembled this great panel for you. But a great panel is only as good as a moderator, and so who can help get things going and do it. And so it's my pleasure to introduce my friend, Joy Cheney, who's the founder of JOI Strategies, which is a Washington, D.C. based firm which advances justice, opportunity, and inclusion for underserved communities, which is what we do as well. She brings more than 25 years of experience. She started real young in policy and advocacy, including senior leadership roles at National Urban League and Chief of Staff to U.S. Senator Christian Gillibrand. Joy is a nationally recognized policy expert. She was named one of Washingtonian Magazine's 500 most influential people in policy. She's also a co-founder of the Women's Tech and Telecom Partnership. She serves on several national boards. She's a graduate of Howard University. I see a bunch of Howard University graduates in the house. and she's also, like myself, a graduate of Harvard Law School. So not as many people in the house. But we're
still cool.
We're still cool. We're nothing further. Let me turn it over to Joy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. Can you all hear me? Yes. Oh, okay. Oh, I have to turn it on. It works better that way. So technology is really important. I'm so glad to be here. Bob is so supportive of me, both as an individual person and as a leader of WTTP. When we had no followers on LinkedIn, he was always there, always liking us and following us and keeping us encouraged. So I thank you, Bob. Thank you for including me today. And I get to be on with all of my friends. And I love, one, how diverse we are, but how, relatively speaking, how young we are. And I think that's emblematic of technology space. The experts, are not all in their 70s and 80s and whatnot. I mean, hanging on, they are, and we appreciate those who are. But they are, there are a lot of people who are rising stars, right? And who are stars in their own right, who are leading, and I think that just shows how much technology is shifting things. Because these here are some great experts, so let me begin by introducing them. I'm going to start at the end with Danielle Davis Canty now. Danielle recently got married, so we want to congratulate her. Round of applause. Danielle and I work together at the National Urban League, but she's an attorney, a tech expert, a digital educator, focusing on making technology and policy accessible to communities impacted. She is Director of Technology Policy at the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, and actually we're doing a project with Joint Center with Narda Jones, WTTP is. She's leading their work on broadband access, privacy, Section 230 and AI. But here's a really cool thing. She has her own podcast called the Miseducation of Technology Podcast and has been recognized as an AI policy influencer by the Brookings Institution. Danielle, we're glad to have you today. I'm going to skip to Alejandro Rourke, who's a great friend, and many of us used to have him on the other side of the table when he was an executive at the FCC. He is now CEO of the AI Policy Forum, a national organization advancing a more inclusive, human-centered AI future. We need that. He was previously at the FCC, where he led Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau and helped implement consumer-focused initiatives, including early AI policies. So you're old hat at this, indeed. Alejandro, we're glad to have you here with us today. Next we have Dakari Mercado. Am I saying it right? All right. She is founder and CEO of Exito & Co., a national advocacy and strategy firm partnering with nonprofits and philanthropy. Can we talk about philanthropy? We'll talk later. To advance policy and a shift in culture. A first-generation attorney, her work spans digital equity, AI governance, media diversity, and civil rights, all the things. And she has a focus on ensuring impacted communities help shape key decisions. We are sisters in that. Finally, we have my civil rights lawyer, partner here, Alejandro Montoya Boyer, She is Vice President of the Center for Civil Rights and Technology at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, where she leads work on AI, data privacy, emerging technologies, and their impact on marginalized communities. Her background spans policy advocacy and economic justice. And prior to her leadership roles at Prosperity Now, that's where she was at Prosperity Now, and she's been in government and philanthropy. We're so glad to have you here. Look, it's really important to have their bios because it informs the questions that they're going, the answers rather, that they're going to give today. I'm going to start with Danielle and Dacre. Let's just get it out of the way. We know what we're here to do. We want to give a little bit of a landscape of what's going on. As my mother said to me today, I guess she wanted me to be prepared. AI is, not the future, it's now, it's happening. She was saying to our cousin John on the phone when they were talking. I'm like, thanks, Mom. What are the most, from your perspectives, what are the most pressing AI issues for tech, telecom, and media specifically, from the perspectives of companies, Congress, and the consumers? I'm going to start with Danielle and Dacre, but if others want to augment, we'll take that too. Danielle?
I would say, well, speaking from thank you.
I know it works.
Thinking from a consumer perspective, I would say there's three primary issues. I would say trust, privacy, as well as cost. So when we think about trust, I'm hearing a lot of, we just don't trust what we see online right now. Me and Dacre actually had this conversation last week where, when we're looking at things online, people are questioning whether or not it's actually reality or if it's AI. And the best example of this, no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, is the videos of proof of flight videos with Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, I'm not here to say that they're fake or they're real, but they just prove the point that I'm trying to make, that people are actually skeptical of the videos that are happening. And with that type of thought process, it just has severe implications for technology, for society, and the law. Because even if we just think about the law, one of our most stable, forms of evidence is video. And now when we are going to have juries looking at video, determining cases, and if they have in the back of their mind that maybe this video isn't real, I just wonder about the implications that will have on our justice system. But also there is the issue of just people not having control over their privacy. A lot of the technologies and the apps that they're using take up a lot of data. They take in a lot of data, and people don't have an understanding of how their data is being used or how it's being shared, and it's only complicated by the fact that we do not have a federal a singular federal privacy framework that governs how that data would be shared and used. And lastly, I would say that AI-generated content is expensive, and people are seeing that reflected in their water and electricity bills. So I would say that the biggest issues that we see right now are trust, privacy, and the cost of AI content.
Thank you.
I definitely second all of that, and I'll do a shameless plug for the conversation that Danielle and I had with Roberta Braga over at DDIA, hosted by the National Hispanic Media Coalition, one of my incredible partners who leads the Spanish Language Disinformation Coalition. So that Building Community YouTube video of our discussion comes out this week, so shameless plug, keep an eye out for that. It's a really good one.
You gotta send it.
Yes.
Bob will make that happen. All right, we want to send it.
And so I think I'd add two additional issues that we've been thinking about. The first is access in general, right? So we talk about AI, and you're right, it's already here, it's already integrated into our lives, but it being present and then us having the ability to use it and know what we're doing are two different things. And so I like to think of broadband access actually as an infrastructure building block to access AI. We know that a third to a quarter of Black and Latino families don't have access to the internet at home still. And so how can we expect folks to be able to use AI in a meaningful way or to keep up with an AI-driven economy if we don't have those digital literacy skills as a foundation? So really thinking about that as an infrastructure issue. And then the second is AI chatbots. So I think this is something really top of mind for policymakers, especially in California and Florida, where some unfortunate events have happened. We know that 52% of teens report that they are regularly using AI chatbots as a companion. And so we're thinking about young people who are sharing maybe some of their most vulnerable moments with an unregulated technology, and we're seeing the implications that that can have on their mental health in some of the worst, most gut-wrenching ways. And so that's something that's really top of mind for us, is how do we square, the utility of chatbots and things like, Claude, Cowork, and ChatGPT with things that are a little bit more sensitive for our young people.
That is so smart. I'm on the board of the National Consumers League, and we were very focused on that. Alejandra, did I catch you off guard? First of all, do you have any responses to that? Or should we go to your question? And by the way, while we're preparing, my nephew is here today. It is the analog spy watch he's using. You are not being recorded. Do not worry about it. Alejandra, I'll go to you. And then I'll let you weave it into your answer. So there's been a growing concern about AI systems producing biased or discriminatory outcomes, particularly for communities of color, whether in housing, healthcare, or hiring. I think, or frankly, justice, as Danielle said. What's driving this concern? Is it that these communities are adopting AI less frequently, as I think Zachary was alluding to, or is it that AI algorithms themselves lead to discriminatory outcomes?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I mean, it's both. There are multiple truths here, and the reality is that adoption amongst particularly Black and Latino folks in the United States is significantly lower than other communities. But that's also built on the fact that the systems themselves are less trustworthy for for our communities. And so if the systems that are being built, whether it's by the AI developers themselves or the way that they're being deployed, so at banks, in hiring companies, housing, mortgage brokers, people doing rent screenings, if those systems are being used to screen out, discriminate against, or have biased outputs against particularly Black and Latino communities, then what incentives are there going to be, or trust is built for our communities to be able to use those technologies? So while AI literacy is certainly a factor, both access and literacy of using the tools, I think first and foremost we have to start with the fact that the way these systems are built, the algorithms that they're built with, and then the most importantly, the data that is used. So AI is built on massive amounts of data, and for the most part, these data sets are not necessarily representative of our communities. And so there are many things that tech companies, both developers and deployers, can do to remedy this. But the reality is right now, people are losing jobs. They're being screened out of housing opportunities, healthcare. I mean, this is life and death. We have people that have lost their lives because AI-driven systems have deemed them their care less critical or less necessary. We have people. Derek Mobley was a Black man in North Carolina that is suing Workday because his application, despite being overwhelmingly qualified, he has been screened out of over 100 different jobs. And so there are real life examples, but I also think we have to take a holistic approach to the way that we think about AI. And it's not just the systems that are being built, but it's the way that they're being used. And right now we're watching as this administration and other folks are weaponizing these technologies against our communities. So when we see things like last week, NBC News put out a poll that said that voters in the United States have a 26% favorability of AI. That's lower than ICE right now by like 12 points. ICE has a 12-point higher favorability than AI in this country, and it's because of the way this technology is being weaponized against us. ICE agents are part of the factor, are using this technology to surveil, gather information, track, detain, kidnap people against their will. It's also being used by law enforcement to wrongfully arrest and detain people, particularly in Black communities. As I was mentioning before, in hiring, in healthcare, all of these places. And so when we talk about the fact that AI is discriminatory, the fact that AI is being used, weaponized against us, all of these are making kind of a broader holistic picture that showcases why our communities are hesitant to use this technology. But there are things we can do. I don't want to come in with like the
Yeah.
doomsday, everything
Well,
is bad.
positive, absolutely.
Yeah, so I just want to like make it known that like there are solutions and remedies to this. But I think that it's this overall comprehensive approach that recognizes why our communities are hesitant with this technology.
You know, what's funny is I was thinking, Alejandro, I said you were the old head, but the truth is, when I was at the EEOC many moons ago during the Obama administration, we held one of the early hearings on discriminatory technology programs. We hadn't really contemplated fully AI at the time, but it was the predecessor to it. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of the old laws can still apply, but we recognized early that they didn't apply exactly. But the practices and the tendencies were the same, to really just amplify and exacerbate existing discrimination. But going back to you, I wanna, because before we move on to spectrum, because we do wanna talk about a range of issues today. Alejandro, I would love to hear what you have to say about, what are the current controversies and most pressing issues in AI, given what your organization now does?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. You know what, I would say at the top of this conversation that we are living through a critical time when all of the decisions that we make today are quickly redefining our relationship to each other and to the world. And in one of the most difficult political environments in modern history. So I am personally invested in working to ensure that we have a shared language to describe the risks and benefits of AI, that we have a productive meeting point for the conversation, and that all of us have a voice and a stake in defining a shared vision for the future. I think that is if we achieve that, then I think we're able to, I think not just live in this world where it feels like AI and technology is being done to us, right, but is like really working for us.
Yeah.
I think that, this conversation, I think our framing today is really all about, multicultural communities, let's say, or folks that have historically faced compounding barriers to access. But I would actually say that it would benefit all of us to kind of expand that framing to include all of us, because I would argue that most people across the United States are who I would consider untapped communities when it comes to the design, deployment, and governance of AI. So I'll underscore that in order to kind of mitigate some of these potential risks of AI or unintended consequences, it's important to listen to what all of us have to say, what we feel, and to break through the myth that we're constantly told is that we don't know, we're not informed enough, we're not smart enough to be able to decide for ourselves how we want this technology to show up in our lives. And what future we want to live in. So I think first and foremost, let's break through that myth, let's confront that myth, and realize that we all have important information to share that can help kind of shape the future. Across the country, we've seen a lot of kind of listening sessions, establishing advisory councils, which I think are foundational to our ability to surface community intelligence, identify pain points, name some of our shared values, and establish red lines to help identify what are the beneficial use cases that allow us to move the conversation both locally and nationally beyond AI as an intimidating, unaccountable algorithm to, let's leverage AI as a community-led solution that offers a clear value proposition to our lives. So I think that the meat of some of these questions is, what do we do once we engage in a public process? We all have a voice in kind of saying, this is what I'm concerned about. Right now, I think all across the country, in every community, because every community is hosting AI infrastructure, people are showing up to community meetings, packed houses, because they have concerns. And I think that local governments aren't engaging with them to co-create, right? To decide what's best for your communities. So I would say once we get beyond that listening stage, it's important that we test it out. We establish a pilot both for I think the technology, but also our proposed kind of policy solution, so that we can pressure test both the policy remedy and how it interacts within the context of specific tools, and invite people that are most likely to be harmed by its decisions to conduct third-party community audits, right? And so that we can identify
I'm gonna get in there
the
because
risk of unintended consequences.
that's right, we missed you at the FCC. Okay, let's go. I said it, no one else did. So let's ask a question about spectrum. Let's go back to the FCC. So Auction Authority was finally reinstated this year. Welcome back after an over 2-year lapse. Spectrum auctions are widely regarded as an effective market-based tool available to the FCC, and the FCC is gearing up for another round of spectrum auctions, including AWS-3, which begins, I believe, this summer. Correct me if I'm wrong. What does that mean for consumers generally, and for expanding wireless in underserved communities specifically? I'm gonna let Alejandro answer, and then if others, including you, Dacre, I see you, girl. She's like, yes. We want to talk about it. All right.
So the One Big Beautiful Bill, Congress finally restored the
That's
FCC's.
the name?
Yeah, the One Big Beautiful Bill, or the One Big Bad Bill, which there's a lot of things that I think aren't great for our communities. But one of the good things that they did is they restored the FCC Spectrum Auction Authority, which I think is a major win. During my time at the commission, we were constantly hoping that authority would be included in basically, honestly, any legislative vehicle that was available. So seeing it finally reinstated, I think is an important milestone and allows us to begin to meet the demands of the AI moment, right? Because look, over the last few years, devices have exploded, new devices. It's no longer just about our smartphones, but we're talking about autonomous vehicles. We're talking about remote med tech, industrial AI that's quickly kind of coming online. And these new systems require high capacity, low latency lanes that licensed spectrum provides, as Chairman Pai kind of underscored. And this auction really, I think, represents a piece of what I hope is going to be a larger and ideally cohesive strategy, but that might just be the optimist in me, to meet the growing needs of consumers, and that preserves an important sandbox for innovation. So there's 3 things that I think I will flag that I think are good that are happening with this auction, and I think can be framed as wins for consumers. And that's, first of all, it expands connectivity by adding new capacity to our wireless networks. Over the last few years, we've seen data usage skyrocket, which leads to slower speeds during peak hours. If you're me, peak hours means 24/7. When I pull the phone out of my pocket, I want it to work. I want it to work fast. So by releasing AWS-3 Spectrum, we are giving carriers the actual bandwidth that they need to handle the increased traffic, which ideally means better video quality and better real-time apps. Because I'm also that guy that's walking around with his phone, in a circle, waiting for the map app to refresh.
Yes, I want it fast.
Right now.
I want to get all my digital
I have no idea where I'm
updates.
going. Please tell me, someone. Second, I think that the auction is an important tool for reaching our hardest to connect communities, because it offers specific bidding credits for rural service providers. And it makes it financially feasible for local providers to bid on hyper-local blocks to deploy high-speed 5G in underserved communities. So these are the providers that are closest to the communities, that understand the terrain, that understand the unique barriers, and that understand their communities. And it creates an environment where there is more competition on the ground, right? And I think third, it helps our rural networks kind of meet the rip and replace deadline that's coming up in May 8th to permanently swap out vulnerable kind of foreign equipment. And I'm happy to kind of let Dacre kind of take us into it more.
Dacre's like, I'm
this
on
is, I
it.
think, the good,
So
but I think we
excited.
can also get into there's some limitations with the strategy that I think we can also get into.
Yeah, absolutely. Joy, when I saw you were gonna ask this question, I immediately thought of that 90s country song, there might be a little dust on the bottle. It's been a while, right? I was like, ooh, let me see. If this crowd was a little young, I might have gone right over their heads, but,
I love it.
yeah.
We're so corny as tech humor. Go ahead.
It's very Texas.
Dacre's from Texas.
Yeah, very
okay.
Texas. I think absolutely, when there's more spectrum, there's more capacity, there is more competition, and that's good for everyone generally. I think when we're talking about historically, intentionally marginalized communities, communities of color, folks in rural areas, I think the answer is a little bit more complicated. Sometimes I think we think of, in a spectrum auction, if a carrier wins a license, it's like, okay, boop, that area is covered now. And that's not how it happens, right?
Okay.
Oftentimes build out goes first to the most profitable areas. We all know that does not often look like our communities.
Yeah.
And so I think the spectrum auction is only as good as the rules that surround it. So definitely like, Alejandro was talking about with some of the bidding credits, but I think also, attaching other things to licenses like coverage obligations, build out timelines to ensure that there's more equity built into how the carriers go about kind of doing that over several years, because otherwise, communities can wait for years for their coverage to increase, for those prices to go down, for the competition to increase, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think if I could also jump in, the other kind of complicating factor of the AWS auction kind of strategy is that there's a lot of people in this room, right, that are grappling with is that the law requires that the FCC identify and auction 800 megahertz of new spectrum to meet an $85 billion revenue mandate. That is stressing a lot of people out because our airways are already crowded, and it creates this really difficult math problem that has a lot of people on edge because it's creating new fears about how is the FCC going to achieve that significant goal. So I wish that I had a perfect answer that neatly kind of addresses exactly how to meet that financial mandate while thoughtfully allocating our limited resources to meet the demand and potential that I think licensed and unlicensed spectrum offers. But the reality is that we don't have any extra bands laying around that aren't being used. So again, I think I'll just kind of underscore and flag that it's important that we have a cohesive, smart strategy for both. And I think also tune into the open meeting that's happening tomorrow, because they're going to be voting on a couple of little kind of spectrum items. So there's a lot that's happening between now and the auction, and between the auction and leading up to 2027, right, where we're going to see really in full force how this administration is defining our spectrum strategy, not just domestically, but around the world. Yeah.
Any other answers on that before we move on? All right. Well, and maybe in questions in Q&A we'll have some other spectrum points that we can
also,
get to.
you guys dig into spectrum. Do you I can think all of us can relate to I think the very first meetings that I had when I started working in Tech and Telecom Policy was a spectrum briefing, and I remember walking out of there with kind of like our then CEO and asking him what did they just say? Right? It was like a 2.5 hour briefing, and we're like, what is happening?
I was like, I didn't take physics.
Right. So lead into that conversation. I think there are no kind of wrong answer. I think right now if we can ask thoughtful questions and just try to understand what's at stake for our communities and what's the opportunity and the potential. Right? How
this is
can
the
we
input
guide?
stage
Right.
of when we're angry about the output, and
Right.
this is why it's so important. Okay,
Yeah.
but we're gonna go to affordability, and I think that is also, right, that's the output, okay? Let's talk a little bit about this. So we know Affordable Connectivity Program, gone for right now. But before so I'd love to just dig in a little bit, and this is for Alejandra and Danielle, and you can decide who goes first. With that program gone, what are 2 or 3, whatever you have, 1 or 2, concrete policy changes that you think could actually pass this Congress, right? Or in the states, I'll take it anywhere, over the next 12 to 24 months, that we should be focused on, right? ACP is sort of behind us at this point. What's the next horizon in terms of affordability?
I would say focusing on USF reform. Again, I would say focusing on USF reform. It is our wish that we put in our comments that we would see some type of ACP-like subsidy included in USF reform, or maybe even emerging with the Lifeline program, which is currently the only subsidy that we have right now. That the amount is very minimal. It's not the $30 that we had before, or the $50 that we had with the emergency broadband benefit. So to me, I think we are still very much so unreasonably optimistic that we will get some type of subsidy, and that's what the Joint Center wishes to see and what we're going to continue to push for.
Yeah, WTTP has been talking about with that with their women's groups. You have to know what that is, and some of them are like, what? We're like, okay, you must know what this is. This is the next horizon. Alejandra.
Yeah, doubling down on the universal service reform opportunity. So, we're watching that closely. We've been in conversation with folks in Senator Ben Ray Lujan's office, who's been leading those efforts. My alma mater office, so just a shout out.
Shout out to you, look at you.
Shout out to the home state, really,
The home
New
state.
Mexico, where all good things are happening. No, but to turn to a little bit outside of, congressional action, because we can't just look to
No,
them.
we can't.
Private sector partnerships or opportunities there. I mean, I think one of the things that we saw in lieu of the ACP was companies providing low-income options, which is a great first step. I think most providers now have some form of cost-cutting effort at like $15 or so a month. But really what we need to be pushing those companies is to make sure that not only are they affordable, but they're quality, that folks are able to have the access that they need to be able to actually like do things. We know that it's requiring more and more gigahertz to be able to do any type of anything on the internet, and so making sure it's quality broadband, that it's consistent, that those prices remain low over time, and people can understand that they're going to be able to have access at that price for at least some significant amount of time. And then lastly, efforts like the Digital Equity Act that brought grants to make sure that people had the literacy, access to the devices and the literacy to actually be able to use the tools that they have. So we talk about connectivity as the three-legged stool, and so we can't forget affordability is just one piece. We also have to think about the other things as well.
So what about anything locally, state and local? What can they be doing?
I'm going to turn that to Alejandro because we don't, we focus on federal advocacy
Okay.
leadership.
Yeah, that's true, you do.
All of those things, love, plus one. Every time we talk about the ACP, I just want to like pour one out for the ACP.
I know, me too.
It was a whole of government, right? It was,
And all of these groups were so essential. I mean, MMTC in
everybody in this
particular,
room,
yeah, everyone in this room.
right, really participated to make this, the largest broadband affordability
And it
effort
wasn't for naught.
in this country ever, right? 23 million households connected, which is a big deal. And I'll say that today, I will underscore, I will flag, I will raise that, cost, affordability is still one of the most cited reasons or barriers to broadband adoption in this country. And I think we made important strides with the ACP, and now I think have kind of left households and communities to kind of fend for themselves. I think that yes, it was great that the ACP created an environment where now a lot of the largest carriers have affordable kind of low cost programs with pretty good speeds. That's great. And it's great to see that states are stepping up, right, with low cost plans, providing their own subsidies or working with ISPs to tie kind of like state grant funding to kind of offering kind of low cost options. So there's a lot of solution, although kind of fragmented across the country, where it's like what is available to you is really dependent on your zip code. But I think that we need to continue to think about how we kind of solve this problem. I agree with kind of like digging into USF reform, super important. And so I think that the good news is that everything is on the table. I think the complicated news is that all of these kind of broadband affordability efforts are kind of faced with an uphill battle in this moment within this current political environment.
And not just, the political environment, but I also think people are forgetting they want to jump straight to the like AI conversation because it's sexy, it's hot. But our communities in particular are going to be left behind from any opportunity that AI will provide without making sure we're first connected and able to use the tools.
And I do feel like our conversation around affordability has sort of been subsumed
Yes.
by AI. We're going straight there. I'm like, well, wait, some of us are still not connected. I mean, the pandemic helped a lot, right? It revealed a lot, but we're still not there in many communities. And right when they were getting there, ACP was ripped away from them. Okay, so affordability is overwhelmingly popular. Let's talk about a few more controversial things. Let's talk broadcast media, and then we're going to do data centers. Yeah, okay. Bob's team put together the order here. I'm like, woo! All right, so this is for anyone, who dares. There's been a lot of consolidation in broadcast media, and that has accelerated dramatically. And I would say over the past decade, feels like even more so now. It's almost a household discussion. Like I said, my mother was talking about consolidation. It's really everyone in a way that we haven't seen before. And from where you sit, how big of a concern is it? I'm gonna go ahead, it's a great concern, but how big of a concern are we blowing this up unnecessarily? Is this sort of just the way things are? And then, what has this concentration of ownership meant, for our communities and how they see see themselves and how they're reflected on TV and online.
Yeah, I'd love to start. So
Yeah.
I actually sat down recently with my parents to watch an episode of The Whole Story by Anderson Cooper. I think it's on HBO, Paramount.
It's
one
good.
Of, one of them. It's really good. Yeah, and he actually has a whole episode on media consolidation and kind of the Jimmy Kimmel fiasco.
There's only one word for that. Yeah.
Yes, and I would consider my parents politically engaged,
Yeah.
but they didn't really know kind of the depth of what was going on over the last several years in broadcast and media consolidation. And so I think it's a really central part of any democracy work right now. I think several people at this table and folks in the room are a part of the Defend the Press Coalition that's led by NHMC that launched last fall. Exactly what it sounds like, Defend the Press, and they're really focused on how can we intervene in media consolidation and try and build in equity and thinking about local journalism in particular in these conversations. And I wanted to mention that recently, I learned something from Commissioner Ana Gomez, who was testifying before Congress, and she mentioned that in this conversation of why is media consolidation dangerous, right, and the consolidation of power in media, and she was talking about the history of the FCC and Congress, while they were trying to put together the Telegraph Commission, which is the predecessor of the FCC, they were contemplating creating it under the Department of Commerce. But they decided that would concentrate the power too much to the Secretary of Commerce. And so that's why they decided to create it, as an independent agency. And I think that's really important to the conversation today, kind of broadly and thinking about where the FCC is at on whether they're an independent agency or not. But I think, this is like the cornerstone of our democracy is that, we're putting the power of truth into fewer and fewer hands. And so if we're not able to access different viewpoints that match, our communities, kind of wherever you're at on the political spectrum, your ideologies, then you're limiting the message and how you decide basic things in your life, including how to engage civically and how to be a member of the educated electorate.
That's right. And really, I mean, this spans whatever your political strata is. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add a quick point that is a little bit of a detour, but I think we also have to talk about it in like the bigger picture of the degradation of like our information ecosystem and literacy more broadly. We are watching mis and disinformation run rampant online and in our media. We're seeing book banning and the defunding of school systems and public libraries and all of these things, which is a intentional project to shift the way that we think about literacy and information and what facts are, what truth is, and I don't mean to get vague and dystopic, but all of these things are happening all at once. And so, when we talk about conversations about what the FCC is doing right now, attacking journalists that are not on the same side as this administration, it is a part of an intentional
even comedians,
broader,
not even
exactly.
Yeah.
And the whole late night thing, they had their little carve out, satire.
Yes. As it should be,
comedian,
yeah.
Exactly. And so to watch all of these things happen in conjunction, it's really important that we name and acknowledge that it's not just it's not just that we're seeing media being consolidated. It's that plus, the pullback on content moderation policies, the change in the way that we're funding our education systems. It's all of these things combined that lead to the stark problems that we're seeing.
And I think in some respects we've been benefited by the overreach because we're able to see it all in one point.
Yeah.
Danielle, are you about to say anything? No. Oh, okay, all right.
No, what are your thoughts?
Tell us.
I'll say one thing, Joy, because I think your question was, and I think I contemplate this a lot, and I know that we think about it a lot. Are we overreacting? Is this as dangerous as it is? And I think in this room, in community with you all, we absolutely should be incredibly concerned. I'm personally concerned at the way that this FCC has kind of taken that or interpreted that public interest standard and turned it into a weapon to kind of silence all types of speech online, right? And going after, American companies, right? Everybody should be concerned, whether you're a private citizen, whether you're a media company trying to do business in this ecosystem. Like, it is a big deal. Freedom of the press is a foundational pillar of democracy. And it's there to ensure that we are holding government accountable, that there is transparency, that we are that it's mitigating,
But I'm gonna ask a controversial question,
overreach,
though.
right? And government abuse of power.
Yes, this is true. But if I were a conservative in this room, and if there are some that they may be thinking of this,
Yeah.
this didn't necessarily start with them. They might have taken it far. But did we open up the door to some of this as we tried to do our own, I would say part of good things with social engineering and, getting people to the right places, and did we open the door to any of this? In terms of not just media ownership, but in government, having a little bit of a heavy hand here.
That's me.
As to anybody. That's to anybody. No, this is the danger of that, right? It can start, but you may not finish it, and not everyone matches your energy. Some people take it far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's an interesting question. I think the context matters.
It wasn't on the page, and I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But I think the context matters, right? When we're talking about the FCC, we're talking about an agency that was in charge of all broadcast media licenses from the beginning of what we know today as modern media. And there's a very ugly, racist, discriminatory past that the FCC has in who they granted those licenses to for a very long time. And so did we maybe open the door? Maybe, but to try and fix what has, to try and create a remedy from, almost 100 years at this point of a discriminatory practice.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think, that this administration has really used the mantle of undoing the conservative bias online with, I opened the door with the content moderation line, which maybe I shouldn't have. But to Dacri's point, I think the context matters, the intent matters, and so being able to respond to growing online hate that leads to real world violence is critical to for our democracy, for the way that we engage in healthy online spaces, responding to a growing disinformation that undermines our election systems, that undermines our healthcare and medical practices. There are contexts here that we have to be able to understand that nuance and be comfortable sitting in that conversation of yeah, maybe we did open this door, but we were doing it whatever. I mean, obviously I'm biased in this, for the right reasons, y'all. We were trying to save our democracy, or protect and preserve our democracy in all of these ways. And so I think having those conversations is important, but acknowledging where we're coming from and what these standpoints are, and being okay being in disagreement. I mean, we're a coalition. The Leadership Conference is a coalition, and I can tell you we have First Amendment purists that lead a lot of our efforts that I am grateful for, that we disagree with on there, or I personally will say, and at times the Leadership Conference with my official hat on, disagree with that hard line on the First Amendment. And right now we're watching it play out in a different way with this administration.
We are indeed. All right, we're gonna hit data centers, and then I really want you all to ask questions. Don't make me call on you. Bob told you where I went to law school. We originated cold calling. I will deploy it. Now, let's go. This is, I think I had written this to Alejandro or Alejandra, but it really can be any of you all. I want to talk about these data centers. I do civil rights work, wearing another hat, and let me tell you, that is a question all of our local folks on the ground are asking. Black Women's Round, a lot of questions that brought them to the Hill last week. They were very concerned about data centers and their impact in their community. But they weren't all where you would think they would be, right? Some of them were they're here, how can we get the most out of it? Some people were how much should we be protesting? So it's not clear where everyone is. Last week the White House released the National AI Legislative Framework, and it calls on Congress to ensure ratepayers don't foot the bill for data centers. That's a good thing, right? That's one protection. But communities are also foregoing significant tax revenue through incentive deals to attract these facilities, as often happens when you're bringing in a big company. Money that would otherwise fund all the things. Does this administration's framework go far enough? I know what the answer to that is. Who's actually at the negotiating table? How many of you all are at the negotiating table? And how do we ensure residents, particularly in lower income communities, are getting a fair shake? Please tell me someone's at the negotiating table. No.
I will say the leadership conference has several coalition members that are really taking lead here. So I am speaking on behalf of those coalition members.
Uh-huh.
This is not a space that we are directly kind of part of the negotiations, because as I mentioned, a lot of this is happening at the local level, and we do not do direct local advocacy. We take local advocacy to the federal space. That's kind of the role that we play. But one of the things that framework does not go far enough. This is my opinion. Those protections are not going to be enough to be able to ensure that communities, and particularly communities of color and other marginalized folks, are actually benefiting from both the job creation, but also the impact that this will have on people's economic circumstances. And so even the president himself admitted that it will be slow to actually ensure that tech companies and other folks investing in this infrastructure will actually take over those costs. And that's just one piece of this. The other piece of it is making sure that folks are at the table negotiating solid community benefits agreements that ensure, one of the big challenges here, like we're talking about jobs, and I'm personally skeptical. There's a limited number of jobs that data centers actually bring. As I mentioned before, I'm from New Mexico. Facebook, now Meta, built a data center right outside of Los Lunas, and promised all of these jobs. And there was an increase in particularly high infrastructure jobs, things like, construction workers, plumbers, electricians, many of whom were from the community, Latino, Indigenous, Black folks from New Mexico. But those jobs are temporary. Now that data center has 19 people working in it.
Right.
So that's not a high yield jobs.
No.
And those 19 people, I don't know the exact number, but I know more than half of them are not from New Mexico. So we need to be talking about the ways in which CBAs are created to make sure that the jobs that are being created actually produces a realistic and solid, sustainable number of jobs, and that those jobs are coming from within the communities. We also can't have this conversation without talking about the environmental impacts that this is having.
Yeah.
So a lot of the lawsuits and the ways that our coalition is engaging in this conversation is recognizing the impact that this is having, not just on people's economic systems, whether you're paying more in utilities, at water and electricity, but the impact it's having on people who have already suffered from environmental racism. That we're not increasing that. And I will openly say we do not have easy solutions for that, but that this framework does not go far enough.
Any other questions on that? Or, I would say my next question is, what should a community be thinking about? If you have any thoughts on that, or if anyone in the room does, you can do it during Q&A about how they can get the data centers are coming. Do you spend the energy on fighting them, which is what some of my clients were saying? Or do you, you work with it and you figure out what you can get out of it? I
All
love
the
that.
above.
That was a lot. You were like,
I'm happy to chime in.
I was just going to say, I think both and, right?
Right.
I think there are communities, particularly like organizers in Tucson who recently had a really impactful victory of stopping a data center from being built. I think if there's the energy and the resources and the know-how in a community, then I think that it's important to have those folks who are putting that pressure. But I think that there has to be folks who are willing to come to the table and negotiate better deals, because we can't just say no data centers at all in anywhere. That's just not realistic. At the same time, we're using AI. Exactly. Right? So I think it has to be both. And I think, like most things, right? I think the community gets to decide for themselves.
Absolutely.
I would plus one to all those things, and just say that very clearly I think this AI legislative framework falls short in addressing the core, I think, friction point at the community level, and that is bridging the trust gap between communities and the frontier labs that are trying to build this like infrastructure projects. People are frustrated, people are angry, people are living with the negative externalities of infrastructure projects that were built without their consent, without any type of consultation. And so that's why I just think I am a firm kind of like advocate for all of us need to engage in a process to ensure that we are defining what a benefit to our community is and looks like. It can be tax incentives. It can be, I took it here. Cedar Rapids and Iowa successfully negotiated, establishing a community fund with Google that kind of bypasses traditional tax structures to directly fund local projects. And these are priorities that were established by the community. I think that we understand kind of like what people are experiencing today, but every community should be able to define how they want to partner with, right, and host AI infrastructure so that it is a mutual benefit relationship and not just, some big player comes into my community and now I'm just kind of stuck with the results of that.
I was talking to a politician who said one of the big companies, had learned from some previous lessons and had decided to make some long-term investments in digital equity and inclusion, right, and training, et cetera, so that people know how to use these systems, and that for them felt important,
Yep.
right, and it was tangible. All right, guys, questions, and then they'll provide the answers. We have so many experts in this room. You guys can probably, I'll take it. Well, come on, come on. If you have answers, we'll take those too.
Yeah, I want to hear from you guys too. If you guys
Yes.
have thoughts, like we're here to learn. I'm always here to learn. So,
And because
what are your
it's
thoughts?
always a networking opportunity, if you don't mind sharing your name and where you work, we'd appreciate it, but you don't have to.
Yes, Jan Verdu here on implementing the 17 sustainable development goals locally and nationally. And to dive further on the data centers or any of these large projects. So, have any of these communities, have any of them been attempting to actually shape these developments, even, for example, things like cooperative ownership or just ways so that the gains would be spread a lot more equitably than now?
Yeah, I mean, there are several examples, and I wish I had them all in front of me right now. So I don't want to. I mean, the example that you gave in Cedar Rapids, but in Arizona as well, the Tucson efforts. In Virginia, there's been several efforts. Maryland community right outside of Richmond in Virginia, right, and in PG County in Maryland. Several examples of communities that are at the table negotiating with. And what's beautiful about a lot of these coalitions is there's, something that we talk a lot about in the coalition strategies, like the insider-outsider approach. And so there's the folks that are at the table negotiating for better CBAs, negotiating for tax incentives, investments into education, literacy opportunities, into cutting costs, and diverting or mitigating the impacts on sustainability and environmental impacts. But then there's also the folks that are pushing no, we want it shut down. We don't want this in our communities. And all sides of that fight are critical to be able to ensure that that the fight against multi-billion-dollar tech companies are actually listening. If we just have the folks sitting at the table and not the folks trying to shut it down, we probably won't be as successful with those negotiations. And so the fact that different communities are taking pretty wildly different approaches, and to Dacri's point, each of those communities gets to decide what's right for them, but kind of really navigating those different strategies. And we are seeing some success points. Cedar Rapids, what we saw in Richmond, I wish I had all the details.
Does anyone else have examples in the room? Anyone else?
He sure does.
My nephew lives in Portland, but no examples about data centers. Well, can we come back to you later? Oh, we'll talk about it in a second. We love it. All right, Danielle.
Well, I would say that there's also an issue of certain communities being completely left out of the conversation. If we talk about Black communities in Memphis, Tennessee, that would they were not a part of the conversations, a part of the XAI conversations, and this was just thrown onto them, and now they're seeing more than just like their water bills and their electricity bills go up. They're also facing actual health.
You have air permit. That's the
Yeah,
issue.
yeah,
You
yeah.
have
They
air
have,
permits.
yeah, exactly. So like they're not even doing what they're supposed to do to begin with. On top of the fact that they're causing problems for the community. So I do think that specifically that data center, I won't say the name again, should should learn from other companies that are trying to do better. But again, I'm not going to sit here and clap for them for doing, being a good human being and doing what they're supposed to do in the first place. But I will say that they should definitely take more of that approach than the approach that they're doing, where they're forcing these centers on the community with no options or no methods to even to push back.
I mean, the tech companies are only, but also the tech companies are only doing better because of litigation efforts, because they watch.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like this is like, oh, they were such good guys now.
And I talk about this in the podcast, Shameless Plug,
Shameless
episode 5, where like, again, we should not be sitting here. I saw a lot of op-eds and things about like, oh, well, Microsoft, and it's just like, okay, thank you for, generating your own energy. And
It's also the power of social media, right? That we've been moving so fast. I mean, so oftentimes we wouldn't have these types of solutions for maybe decades or generations in when we realized we made a mistake and weren't at the table early on. Now we've caught on very fast. People are talking about it. People who are not, originally sophisticated in data centers and all of this, they instinctively understand right away what's happening here, and that is fueling some of it. Which I think is a good thing. But you're right, it's thanks to all of us, not necessarily companies doing something independently, but we thank them nonetheless because it's really important. Now, sorry, we have to. Go ahead. Sir. Yes. We're bringing the microphone to you.
I can speak loudly if you want.
But we'll get it for the recording.
I see. Well, I'm Edwin. Today I'm here with the Scope of Victims Foundation. But just a quick comment about your question, and then I have a question. When I put on my libertarian hat on, there was no negative door that was open, because if you are honest about the truth and you support voluntary workplace policies, taking down barriers that are artificial barriers to people, and you support things like freedom of association, whether you will want to be part of the alt-right or an LGBT group, those are arguably conservative values. Fascism and communism are not the right or the left. That's something else. So
I agree with you.
So just a gentle corrective on your question. Now, my question is, and this is philosophical, how do we yield all the progress incentives that are happening now with water rights and data centers? And I mean, this is not a conservative or a liberal problem. I think it's both, because if you live in the Navajo Nation, the liberal people of the People's Republic of California has been screwing the Navajo Nation's water right forever, even though they have rights to it. And so have all the red and purple states in the four corners. So how do we prevent that? Because autonomy for communities sounds really good, but if you are a neighbor in Amarillo, Texas, and you have the mayor saying, they're gonna come anyway, we might as well get $10 out of it. That's not autonomy. That's a threat. And that's the reality. And there's just not enough water. So what are the solutions long term? Because there's just not going to be enough water, period. That's the truth. So how do we yield those progress incentives?
You can ask a question anytime. That was brilliant. Go ahead.
Edwin.
Yeah.
So I would say, regrettably, and I think to everybody's points here, at some point at the beginning of this, right, these AI frontier labs made the decision that the best approach to kind of build AI infrastructure, to hyperscale AI infrastructure, was just to build it and hope that nobody was going to notice, right? And everybody noticed, right? That got a lot of people really upset. I think that we are living with the consequences of those decisions, right? And so I think that they've shown us, right? They've demonstrated how they're approaching, right, this conversation. when we don't kind of like intervene, right? They've demonstrated to us how they're thinking about it. To me, I think the magic and the solution is in the process, right? I think that our goal should not be about a race for efficiency. It should be about ensuring that all of us feel like technology is working for us, that it's making our lives better, that it's grounded in community benefit and our shared values. Otherwise, we really kind of run the risk of getting stuck in a race to the bottom with China and an arms race with the rest of the world.
I think we also need to be pressuring these companies there are better ways to build data centers. And other countries are showing that there are ways in which we can build equally powerful and efficient data centers without the tremendous amount of water and electricity use. So one, being able to incentivizing tech companies that even if it's more expensive to build, you have to, because in the long run, we need this water and we don't want high electricity costs. I also think we need to be having this as a global conversation, because the data centers they don't build here, they're building in the global south, and our communities in the global south are our communities here.
Absolutely, and I think I'll build off of that and just say, to your question, I think this is a part of a larger conversation in water justice, right? Right to the things that we need to simply exist. And to your point about the Navajo Nation, I think that there's a reckoning that needs to be had in local communities, to where we hear this conversation of, well, I'm not political, I don't get involved, and it's like, okay, well, do you want clean water? And so I think that there are more creative solutions that we need to start brainstorming of how do we take ownership as communities over our utilities, over the things that really matter the most to us, that are at stake when we're talking about something like, can we trade you $10 to come build our data center?
Additional questions? We got one here and one there. We'll go here first, and then we'll count.
Adianka, you should be answering the question.
Yeah. Well, I love you all, and I just want to hear your opinions on this. Adianka with the National Urban League. Great to see all of my colleagues having this conversation. We just celebrated 30 years of the Telecommunications Act, and have been having discussions within our ecosystem of what it took to get that landmark legislation over the hump, and the foundational aspect of it calling for universal service. Unfortunately, 30 years later, the promise of universal service is unfulfilled, and we are still having the same conversations around the digital divide and now AI. But my friend and colleague mentioned universal service reform. I'm just eager to hear your thoughts on how you think it is possible for us to have the next version of the Telecommunications Act, given where we are politically and all the things and challenges that we still face around universal service, access, broadband, given our political climate, Congress. Are you optimistic? Is it possible? And what do we as a community, as an ecosystem, need to be doing to make sure that we don't wait another 30 years before we see progress?
Danielle?
As far as, I don't want to say I'm not optimistic, but this administration does definitely worry me about doing anything with the Telecommunications Act, especially as one of our leading areas is Section 230, and I just think that right now we should just be quiet and just not say much about it. But I think that this is going to have to be a fight that is fought from the ground on up. It's going to have to be the communities putting pressure on companies and the government alike, because at this point, honestly, the administration is not even respecting First Amendment rights. So how do we go to a administration that starts from that point and talk about these issues? So for me, the only way it's going to happen is if it starts from the ground up, and it's all of us, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, just recognizing what we're up against, and just going from that route, because I am definitely just not confident in this administration doing what they should do. And I'm not even a person who's like, this side, that side, but I'm genuinely just not convinced that anything meaningful or helpful will come out of any type of negotiations with the members of Congress currently in charge right now and this administration.
Filed under not optimistic. Go ahead.
Also not optimistic, but I do think that we have the opportunity to come together as a network and coalition of folks to put forth what our asks and framework would look like for the next 30 years, and really being prepared, particularly from a civil rights perspective, in conversations where we were not even involved in the creation of the Telecommunications Act back in the 90s. And so what are the asks that we have, and have that framework ready for the one little bit of optimism that I will have is a change in power, so that when shifts happen and we can look to update our legislation, we're ready with that framework.
I want to let you answer, but is there anyone who is optimistic, does see green shoots? I want to give you an opportunity as well, besides my nephew. But go ahead. What's your...
Oh, I was just going to add, plus one, I think as far as where philanthropy is at, I don't think that they're optimistic either. And I think that's important for all of the organizations in this room. I think right now is our time for visioning, particularly if you do kind of broader democracy work. What does it look like to have our own version of a very detailed plan for when things shift and we have the opportunity.
Great. All right. Sir, you have the last question. I am going to let him say something at the end, but you go ahead. Otherwise, I won't be able to get back home. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Landon Bailey, and I'm here representing with our CEO, the African American Mayors Association.
Wonderful.
And so we have membership of mayors, and about 6 to 8% of them represent smaller to rural communities. So when it comes to AI, a lot of our mayors are very interested, but of course they struggle with infrastructure, access, education, and then as Danielle mentioned earlier, the cost. So just curious to know if there's any resources or strategies that we should be looking into or thinking about as we continue to help our mayors kind of move into that direction of being a little bit more tech savvy in some ways.
You all need a whole session on data centers, but go ahead.
I'll just say, and maybe this isn't quite as much of a resource, but the Digital Equity Act, as a part of the bigger bipartisan infrastructure package, was created to try and help specifically rural communities build this infrastructure to be able to engage in the technologies of today and tomorrow, and that was gutted, by the Trump administration, by Trump's CIA. And so there's active litigation right now to challenge that. And there are opportunities to engage in that, amicus briefs and additional things. So I'd love to chat with you about that and see maybe we can partner.
Another thing that we've seen is cities creating sister city partnerships with communities that do have built out AI infrastructures, and so cities creating kind of tech sharing agreements and opportunities. I know that's a longer term investment for mayors, but especially in rural communities, if you can create a partnership, between Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Grant, New Mexico, and do kind of have opportunities in that way as well.
I hope you'll also work with the National Urban League. Yeah, so definitely make that connection, because I know that obviously the connection with Mark is important, but just they're doing a lot of work there. Right here?
I have
Oh wait, I'm sorry, hold on, Danielle, and then
the Joint Center of America's Black Think Tank. We are in talks of putting together something for Black mayors on this specific issue. So I'd love to get your contact information afterwards so we can connect and see how we can work together on that.
The National League of Cities also is rolling out a lot of great resources and toolkits. Plug in any way that we can support. We are happy to, just facilitate conversations or to provide kind of feedback or anything that you guys need. Please let us know, because I think that we need to come to the table as kind of very influential and powerful, community advocates, and anything that we can do to support those efforts.
Bob, we got your next program. You in the back.
I just had a quick question. How do I get one of those analog spywalkers?
Oh, on that, thank you all for being here. But the last question goes to this young gentleman, because it's about the future.
No, I don't want to ask.
Okay, well there you go. Thank you so much.
Can we give our panelists and moderator a round of applause, please?
Hello, I'm Christopher Wood. I'm the Executive Director and Co-Founder of LGBT Tech. Thank you all so much for being here. This was an incredible conversation. I feel like we covered many major issues and some of them in depth, from AI to spectrum, affordability in broadcast media, and data centers. That's quite a list. But I wouldn't expect anything less from our communities, because our communities are thinking about all of this all the time and the way that it impacts. Many of the organizations represented here, the organizations in the room, they are talking to legislators, they are looking at research and really digging into this to create a better future for our communities tomorrow. And so thank you all for the work that you continue to do. I know that it isn't always easy, and especially as we're stretched across so many different policy areas, I think it's really helpful to remember we didn't always have a voice here. We didn't always have a seat at the table. So we have a seat at the table. Let's keep the seat at the table. Let's make sure that we're continuing these conversations, that we are continuing to raise issues. Whether we kick the door open or not, we're going to stay in the room, we're going to stay at the table, and really thank you all for being here. I think it's also really important to recognize that there are some companies listening, there are some industries listening, and to one of the panelist's points, this may be the time for visioning, because maybe we can't get it done, but maybe we can actually start thinking about tomorrow. So with that, these are going to take place about once a quarter, so please make sure that you're on our list. If you don't already follow some of the organizations online, at LGBT Tech, at MMTC Online, at HTTP_policy, at OCA National. It's great. Thank you to Joy, Alejandro, Daiquiri, and Danielle. Also, thank you so much to CTIA, to, as I have always referred to him as Bob does, Chairman Pai, Mudajit Pai, to Jocelyn, to the entire CTI team, and to our partner organizations, HETP, MMTC, and OCA. And on behalf of me and my team, thank you so much for coming today.